This is the Practical Homeopathy Podcast, episode number 167 with Joette Calabrese.
Hi, I'm Joette Calabrese, and I welcome you to our healthcare movement, yours, mine, and the countless men and women across the globe who have retaken control of their family's health with practical homeopathy. So, for the next few minutes, let's link our arms as I demystify homeopathy, what was once considered an esoteric paradigm, into an understandable, reproducible, safe, and effective healthcare solution available to all. This is the medicine you've been searching for, my unique brand of homeopathy, practical homeopathy. Have you ever had a shocking experience after which you felt sudden surges of adrenaline through the body? Now, you might have been shaky and felt fearful and panicked. How about an anxiety attack or panic attack? Well, you're not alone. A national health statistic I saw states that during 2022, about 1 in 5 adults age 18 and older experienced symptoms of anxiety in the past 2 weeks. But we don't have to fear, because on this podcast, I'm going to share about one of my favorite homeopathic medicines, which has the ability to address these conditions and much more. I'll bet you can guess which medicine it is. If you guessed Aconitum napellus, Aconite, you were right. Some of you may already know that Aconite has been known to address conditions, such as colds or flu, especially if they come on quickly, coughs, croup, fever, cardiac events, otitis media, sleeplessness, and much more. But in this podcast, we're going to focus on its ability to address anxiety, shock, and fear. So I've invited some of my students to join us on this podcast because they have their own stories about Aconite. So I'd like to welcome Elizabeth. She is a mastermind member, an ambassador, has finished the 2 years, the Academy and Mastery, and has her own business. Go ahead, Elizabeth. We'd love to hear your story.
Hi, Joette. Thanks for having me. One moment that really stands out to me was during my husband's serious chronic illness. He had just received some very discouraging news, and it triggered a full-blown panic attack. His heart was racing. He felt helpless. You could just tell his body didn't know how to process the news he had just received. And I remember thinking, this isn't just everyday worry and anxiety. He's in shock. So without making a big deal about it, I gave him a dose of Aconite, which is a remedy we use a lot in homeopathy for sudden fear and panic. And within minutes, and I mean minutes, I watched the panic melt away. And he looked at me and he said, "What did you just give me? I feel so much better." And that was one of those moments where I realized how powerful the right homeopathic remedy can be, because his body was finally able to just calm down and reset. And that's just one of countless stories where I have had horrific nightmares and had panic and anxiety and shock, and Aconite worked every time. My daughter has also had the same. I've had a friend who was in hospice, and I was able to see her benefit from Aconite as well. Client, pregnancy, horrific pregnancy, labor and delivery, ultimately PTSD. And that was one of the really big things that we worked on, was preparing her mind and her body to prepare for the upcoming new baby with the labor and delivery. Hypertension, lots of different things, but even just everyday things like being exposed to cold winds at like one of my children's soccer games or something, the onset of a cold or a cough. Aconite is just so beautiful. So I take it everywhere with me because I have seen it be so powerfully effective with a number of health issues.
Well, what's great about it is that it's not a vitamin or a supplement or a mineral. It's a homeopathic medicine, so we use it only as needed. So in each of those events that you were just discussing, that's exactly when we would use Aconitum. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Those are lovely stories, especially the first one with your husband. Bad news, yes. All right, let's go to Jennifer. Jennifer's in our mastery program now, and she's also an ambassador. And I'd love to hear your story, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me, Joette. The story I remember the most for Aconite is when I was at a backyard pool party and several of the children were playing in the pool. One of my sons slipped under the water for a moment. His brother pulled him back up so quickly, there wasn't any commotion at the time, and you would have thought it would be forgotten because it was such a non-issue. But later that day, he started to whimper and cry because it wasn't immediately after the fact. I was like, what's going on? What's wrong with you? And finally, I deduced that he was panicking from having slipped under the water, and he was sort of reliving the incident in his mind. You could sort of see in his face that his mind was elsewhere. He was going through that fear again. So once I realized that, I gave him a dose of Aconite and it helped calm him down, and he was able to go off and play. I did have to give it again a couple more times, as that panic started to resurface. Each time was a little bit further apart, and he was a little less panicky. The last time he actually just came up to me and asked me for a dose because he started to feel it come back. And then he walked away and played, and that was that.
That is so observant of you, Jennifer, because that is something that only the watchful eye of a mother would notice something like that it must be related and it's a little bit delayed. It's a great medicine, and it's useful for even if it were a week later and you saw that reaction. You might not even put the two together and associate it with the slipping underwater, but you know how they're reacting. It's that panic. Yeah, Great story. Wow, especially even for going underwater for a little one. Thank you, Jennifer. I'd like to take a moment and point out that there are several kinds of shock. There's often medically diagnosed shock where the blood pressure drops and there's maybe a rapid or weak pulse, and there can be disorientation. And then there's the other when you feel shocked from a seemingly shocking event. And the first is more extreme, of course, but both types can be addressed with Aconitum. So I had a client once, she would grasp her chest and put the palm of her hand hard against her chest, and she would say, no matter what happened, anything that was happening in her life that was a little interesting or heavy, she would say, oh my gosh, it was the shock of my life. I'm shocked by this. It's the shock. And she would always use that word shock. And when I think back about this woman, this is someone who, when I was first starting out in homeopathy, the event that started all this is that she had suffered a good amount of mental shock when she was a young woman. And from that time forward, I think she was still experiencing that shock, even though it was not the shock of her life each time, but there was an event that was the shock of her life, and it brought it all back. So let's go to you, Laurie. Laurie is a graduate of the Academy, and she's a mastery grad, study group advisor. She's an ambassador, and she also sees clients. So, Laurie, please, let's hear your story. I'm always looking forward to the stories that you give us.
Oh, thank you, Joette. Thank you for inviting me here. I love that I get to talk about Aconite because it's one of my favorite remedies. In fact, one of the reasons it's my favorite remedy is because I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't taken Aconite. I had such a fear of stage fright and just talking to people. Even if I was in a group of people that I knew, I would still struggle with it. And I know most people use gelsemium, and I love gelsemium, but I never felt the panic ease up like I did when I used Aconite. And now I'm talking to hundreds of people on a regular basis. Aconite totally transformed my life. I love that it's the remedy that not only helps with serious conditions, but it's also the remedy for living in everyday life. What do I mean by that? I want to give you an example. So we moved to Tornado Alley when my son was just 8. He has Down syndrome and had never experienced any intense weather before. But that first month after we moved, we had 3 major storms. 2 had tornadoes that touched down just outside of where we lived. Wind was so violent that we had 2 large 100-year-old oaks get knocked down. After that, my son couldn't even tolerate having clouds in the sky. He would melt down. He would have panic attacks. He would run around with his little headphones if there was thunder or lightning. And so I decided that I was going to give Aconite a try. So knowing that Aconite is so great for fear and anxiety, this was a no-brainer for me. And that next storm, it was a lightning storm, and it was terrible. It scared even me. But he was there, content, playing on the bed like nothing was going on and nothing was happening. And I have to say, that was just a miracle in itself. After that, no matter what, we knew that we could use that to help him get through it. But over time, he has become less fearful of the storms. So now I almost never need to employ it at all.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this kind of medicine, and especially aconite. Yeah. Have it on hand just in case. Thank you, Laurie. 2 really good stories. Excellent. All right, let's go to Nealy. Nealy is in our mastermind group, and she's an ambassador. So, hi, Nealy.
For anyone that doesn't know, most of my clients are dogs, and a lot of times that translates into their people as well. So dogs tend to take on our stuff, and we tend to project onto our dogs. You learn that after you talk to several people and see what's going on. So if you have both of those things going on at the same time, you can end up with quite the storm. So I had one client that she was insisting that her dog had serious anxiety and he wouldn't eat and he paced and he panted and he was having all kinds of issues. But you could hear in her voice the whole thing going on with her. And I was like, normally I wouldn't suggest doing this as an ongoing thing, but along with the full schedule, I had her add Aconite twice a day for her and the dog. The next time I talked to her, I was like, how are things going? And she's like, well, he's doing really good and he'll eat anything I put in front of him. You could hear in her voice. She was all calm and relaxed. It was great. So that was one of those times where you just had this, just like Laurie was talking about, a tornado going on in the house between the dog and the person. So that was a little unusual bit of use as, using it concurrent like that. Normally, like everyone else has talked about, it would kind of be just an as needed thing. But that particular instance, I thought it required it. So it worked out great. Another thing it's really, really effective with dogs is, you'll have young dogs that get car sick or don't like riding in the car, afraid of the car. Works quite often very well in those situations as well. So great thing to keep on hand.
That is so common, Nealy. The dog in the car business. You use a 200 before they get into the car when they see that they're about to get in, yes. And then they administer it frequently throughout the ride, or sometimes you don't even have to repeat it, perhaps.
Yeah. My boss, when I was working at the boarding kennel, he got a new puppy and he was terrified of riding in the car. So I had him do that, and he only had to do it for like a week. And ever since then, puppy's been fine. So, it helped him work through it and he's got past it. So that was a great success.
Wow. Great story. Remember that, friends, because I know a lot of dogs, especially the smaller ones, don't like being in cars. True. Well, thank you, Nealy and Jennifer and Elizabeth and Laurie. These are really great stories. I hope that everyone else can get as much out of it as I have too. And, I've heard these stories a million times, but it never becomes boring. This is so interesting to hear each story, and it helps you remember them better. Remember the remedies and how to use them when you have a story that's associated. So thanks again, students. Let's talk a little bit more about Aconitum, shall we? I know our subject today is Aconitum A for anxiety. It's easy to remember, but it's also for fear and shock. I can't help but mentioning that one should remember Aconite as Arnica of the eye. So if you know how Arnica is used in injuries, remember Aconitum for eye injuries. It can be used for inflammation of the eye or the eyelid, straining eyes. You may have weakness or tiring of the eyes accompanied by pain or headache or blurry vision and sensitivity in the eye. And sometimes because of all of this, there's an inability to keep the eyes open. So Aconite is also useful when there's an embedded metal body in the eye. Can you imagine how awful that is? Dr. Herring from a century ago spoke about it this way. He said, inflammatory conditions, he's talking about Aconitum, resulting from irritant action of foreign bodies as chips of steel or stone or coal in the cornea, which produce dry rubbing of lid over the ball with injected vessels, irritation caused by ingrowing lashes. So that was written in 1879. So I also want to recall a story of a friend of mine whose husband was trimming the branches around their house and one poked him in the eye. And on the way to the hospital, she gave him Aconitum 200. Now you can imagine he was disturbed. He was anxious about what had happened, couldn't see. There was a great pain. And on the way to the hospital, by giving him Aconitum 200, it calmed him down. And she continued giving it to him even until once they were in the hospital and carried on with it for that day and even into the next day. All they had to do once they got to the hospital was to put a patch on the eye so that he wasn't using it. and to keep it covered for a period of time. And as I said, she continued to give it to him several more doses after the injury for a few days. So remember, Aconite, Aconitum, is the Arnica of the eye. I also have to say that one of the main threads in the Aconitum picture is around the subject of death. Fear of death, certainty of death, near-death experience, worry about death, prediction of death, etc. So let me share some other indications for the use of Aconitum around the topic of anxiety, fear, shock, and associated with death. There's panic and anxiety, not unlike what was mentioned here by my students. The person can be inconsolable. There may be a fright that's followed by panic and shock. Can be palpitations of the heart. Fear of death, and sometimes they say believes that he will die soon and predicts the day or the time of his death. Now, he's not actually predicting it, but he's thinking that by tonight at midnight, I'm going to be gone. So they fear that they're going to die. And I want you to remember, our Arsenicum album also has this, but Aconitum has it even bigger than that. They feel that they're dying right now. Also, one of the best ways to use Aconitum is during labor. When a mother's giving birth in labor, she might be thinking of, what if the baby dies? If she can't stop thinking about that, something's wrong, something's wrong. I think the baby could die. We got to get the baby out. Or something's wrong with me. I could die, and then we'll both go. That fear is so common during labor, and that is exactly what you want to have on hand, is that Aconitum, a couple doses right there during the labor, and it can put everything to rest. Or for someone who thinks about death a lot, I'm afraid it's going to happen. I don't know if I should go outside. I can't go over bridges. I can't go on planes because I'm afraid I'm going to die. It becomes a daily or nearly daily plaguing thought. And then in that case, it's different than what we've talked about pretty much so far. It becomes a chronic anxiety, a specific anxiety, a fear of death, of something really bad happening, and especially around the heart. So it's not only fear of a heart attack, but a fear that comes about, or panic that comes about regarding the heart, that at the moment of a heart or cardiac episode. So remember it for panic attacks with shaking, trembling. There may not be shaking of trembling, but if you see that, I want you to be thinking of Aconitum first. Sudden surges of adrenaline through the body leading to trembling, and of course, panic. There can also be panic attacks with numbness and tingling of the fingers down the arms and into the feet even, all the way through the extremities. Agoraphobia, afraid to go out of the house. Fear of crowds, fear of busy streets, fear of narrow streets, fear of going to doctors and dentists. How common is that, my friends? Fear of total disasters. I'm sure something bad's about to happen. Fear of the dark. And fear of ghosts. Now, I know that might sound strange, but when people start thinking about that, or children, or there even could be dreams about them. And so one more thing about Aconitum. Violent reactions to a fright or weather conditions, not unlike what Laurie mentioned, that can indicate the use of Aconitum. Today, we live in very comfortable, controlled temperatures. We have heat and air conditioning, and we don't realize how potent, how influential, how commanding weather can be, even if we're inside. So we keep thinking about how weather can't bother me. I'm inside and protected. But even that weather, that storm outside, even if we're not in the storm, we're in our safe home, it can still affect someone who might need Aconitum, not unlike what Laurie mentioned. So, my friends, I hope today's conversation has shown you that you don't have to live at the mercy of sudden fear or of panic or of long-term fear or that overwhelming surge of adrenaline that can knock you off your feet. Whether it's the shock of a frightening moment or a lingering long-term anxiety after a loss, or the daily grip of worry that makes your heart race and your hands shake, or the dog that shakes on the way to the car because he knows what's forthcoming. Aconitum napellus stands ready as one of homeopathy's most powerful first and even second, third, and last responders. So we've heard beautiful real-life stories today from Elizabeth, Jennifer, Laurie, and Nealy. And these are the kinds of stories about homeopathy that aren't rare. I hear them every day, and so do they, because they're in the world of homeopathy. They're the everyday victories that become possible when we understand how to use this remarkable medicine well. So the next time you feel that sudden wave of fear, that racing heart, or that I'm sure I can't handle this feeling, remember Aconitum. And so until next time, stay mighty, my friends, stay prepared. And remember, fear may come knocking, but with Aconite in your toolkit, you never have to let it move in. See you soon. It's my honor to share many lessons on this simple method of using homeopathy for free, without affiliates or advertising, here in my podcasts, but also my blog posts and Monday Night Lives. But it's critical that you learn how to use these medicines properly. These podcasts should serve as only the beginning of your training. Peruse joetteslearningcenter.com to find fun study group opportunities and in-depth courses developed by subject. So with the proper training, you can join the thousands of students before you in developing the confidence and competence to protect the health of your family and loved ones with my brand of homeopathy, Practical Homeopathy.
You just listened to a podcast from internationally acclaimed homeopath, public speaker, and author, the founder of the Academy of Practical Homeopathy, Joette Calabrese. Joette's podcasts are available on all your favorite podcast apps. To learn more and find out if homeopathy is a good fit for your health strategy, visit practicalhomeopathy.com.